It's me, Jessica McCaskill, WBC, WBA, Super Lightweight Unified Champion of the world. I wanted to give a big shout out to The Relay on YouTube. Check it out. Great boxing talk show. Has all the info that you need. Check it out. The Relay on YouTube.
Motherfucking Relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, a tweet from Frank Warren reads, "Today, they finally replied to our June 6th offer to Callum Smith to fight Billy Joe Saunders. Turned down. No counteroffer, no negotiations, just a flat no. An all-British unification pay-per-view fight with a 50-50 split and a 7-figure guarantee isn't apparently tempting?" Essentially, Frank Warren made this offer to Callum Smith some time ago, and for what it's worth, you gotta take your hat off to Frank to being willing to extend that olive branch to what is his promotional and network rival, the people over there at Matchroom/Sky Sports. In previous videos, I talked about how, Billy Joe Saunders, he was moving up into the super middleweight division, and he may have the chance to become a champion in that weight class. But simply holding a belt, isn't going to be enough. He's going to need opponents, and because he's going to need opponents, that would require Frank Warren to perhaps extend an olive branch to what is his domestic rival. The people over there at Matchroom, the people over there at Sky Sports, Eddie Hearn, okay? Now, it appears that, the offer was legit. There were questions as to whether or not the offer was a real offer, or was this just a smokescreen from Frank to try to make Eddie Hearn look bad. There were questions, but the offer itself does appear to have been a real offer, because Joe Gallagher himself, Joe Gallagher, who just so happens to be Callum Smith's trainer, he had this to say in regards to the offer.
No, it's not a good enough offer. It's an offer. And it's like anything in life, everyone can make an offer, but it's not the offer that would tempt Callum Smith as the world #1 to defend his titles against Billy Joe Saunders on another network platform. So that's it. I had a chat with Callum today. Like I said, we'll speak to Eddie, but without even speaking to Eddie, me and Callum have already agreed that it's not enough. The money's not enough, and if they're genuinely and deadly serious that they want to entice the #1 in the world at 168 to defend his titles or in the unification, it's Billy Joe Saunders, then you have to pay the right money for that quality of fighter.
There's a legitimate question to be addressed here, folks. There really is. There's a legitimate question as to whether or not these guys are being reasonable. Is it reasonable to walk away from an offer like this given the circumstances in a super middleweight division? A division where the world titles are split 3 ways between 3 different outfits. One of those outfits is the PBC. They've got 2 of the world champions at that weight, and they've got many of the contenders too. They've got Caleb Plant, the IBF champion. They've got Anthony Durrell, the WBC champion, and that green belt could very soon change hands into the hands of David Benavidez, the former champion. Once again, another PBC guy. The PBC being who they are, their reputation for not working well with others. That creates a situation to where they can do a round robin between their world champions and their contenders without batting an eyelash at any other outfits in the weight class. That puts Saunders in a situation, that puts Callum Smith in a situation. It puts them in a situation to where in many ways they're an island, and they can't afford to be an island.
It won't work.
It's not enough to have one of the champions at the weight. It's not enough for a guy there to be holding a belt, because no matter what belt he holds, he's going to need opponents. I talked about this in my previous videos, and I'll leave the links to those videos in the description box. That, if Billy Joe Saunders ends up going to super middleweight and becomes a champion there, that's not going to be enough. He could end up having another uneventful and ignominious reign like the one he just had at middleweight. What he needs are opponents. So Frank Warren, he better get that olive branch out and reach out to Eddie, because the best bang for your buck fight in that weight class really is Callum Smith versus Billy Joe Saunders. Domestically, that fight could put a lot of a lot of asses in a lot of seats. Now, I'll say this much about Frank Warren. You got to take your hat off to the guy for making the offer, for extending the olive branch, for trying to make something happen. You've got to take your hat off to him. At minimum, you've got to take your hat off to him for doing that. But to address the offer, a 50-50 split, the question there is, Is Billy Joe Saunders actually on equal footing with Callum Smith?
Is he?
You know, for a 50-50 split. You get half, I get half. Is he really on equal footing with that guy? Think about the question for a second. Billy Joe Saunders has been a champion at super middleweight for approximately 10 seconds. And he did not participate in some kind of high-profile fight to become a champion there. Compare the name of Shafat Isufi for what was the vacant WBO title that Gilberto Ramirez left behind to the name of George Groves, who was the reigning WBA champion. I'm sure the people in the UK don't need me to tell them who George Groves is and what kind of situations he's been in. Situations with the likes of Carl Froch.
2 times.
80,000 people at Wembley Stadium, you understand? That is the caliber of fighter that Callum Smith took out to become a world champion. A marquee guy, a marquee fighter over there in the UK. Not just a solid opponent, not just a reigning champion, but a guy who's got some marquee value. Whereas in the case of Billy Joe Saunders and his ascendance into becoming a champion, you fought for a vacant belt against Shafat Isufi.
Zuzu.
An unheralded guy. I mean, you don't need me to tell you that. So the question then becomes, when you cross-compare both of these guys' marquee value, how did they get to the point that they became champions? Where are they now? The question then becomes, is 50-50 actually a reasonable offer? Are these guys on equal footing with each other? And I dare say no. I dare say no. I dare say no. Callum Smith is the consensus number 1 across the board at 168 pounds. He's the Ring Magazine champion via their rankings. He's ranked at number 1 via Transnational, number 1 at, with BoxRec, and number 1 with ESPN. This is, in fact, the consensus number 1 guy at the weight. And you're making an offer to the number 1 guy that would require him to not only cross the street, but give up half the pot to Billy Joe Saunders. Billy Joe Saunders, who, you know what? He really hasn't done a hell of a lot at the weight. I think the offer is a serious offer. I think it's a solid offer. I don't think it's a terrible offer. But I will say that Billy's not quite on equal footing with Callum Smith. So I do see a bit of precedence for Callum to say, I'm not crossing that street to give this guy half. I've participated on a bigger stage than this guy against a bigger name than anybody he's fought in recent memory. You think about that, and then you think about how the name of Callum Smith has been tied to the likes of Canelo Alvarez in what could be Canelo's next match. Callum could be his next opponent. That's one of the various opponent options we've been hearing about the last couple of days, the last week or so. You think about that if you're Callum Smith, yes, Joe Gallagher, he's basically saying to Canelo, if you want to fight Callum, put up or shut up. Make us an offer. But better still, the fact that Callum is in a position where that fight is actually feasible, it being that, he's a Matchroom guy, and Matchroom's in bed with DAZN, who's also in bed with Canelo Alvarez, the fact that both of those guys share a common opponent in Rocky Fielding, you have to wonder if there wasn't some kind of an intention behind that. So you think about these things, that Callum Smith, he's in a similar position to Billy Joe Saunders, but there are other doors associated for Callum that are not associated for Billy. I'm sure Billy would like to be in the running for a Canelo fight just as much as Callum. And with those things in mind, these guys actually aren't on equal footing. I mean, if you're Callum Smith and a Canelo Alvarez fight is at minimum, a possibility, you think to yourself, I'm the number 1 guy at the weight. I'm the Ring Magazine champion. I took out George Groves, and I didn't decision the guy. I knocked him the fuck out. That's who I fought to become a champion. That's the route, that's the path that I took to get to where I am today. And you think that I'm going to cross the street to go over there to BT Sport, the rival network, to give you half the pot, Billy Joe Saunders? No, thank you. At minimum, what I'll say is that I think that Frank Warren made the offer with genuine intentions to see the fight get made. I don't think it was a bullshit offer. I don't think he was playing games and it was a smokescreen. I think the offer was real. But from where Callum Smith is sitting, him, Joe Gallagher, Eddie Hearn, they're going to look at that and think to themselves that it's not enough. Not for our guy to have to cross the street. For your guy, it's not enough. I mean, it's just not. They're playing it, I will say, that in doing so, they are playing it a bit close to the chest. But better still, is there a reasonable precedence for them to look at that offer and say, No gracias. Is there a precedence? And I dare say, yes, there is. A slight precedence, a precedence that has them playing this a bit close to the chest, but better still, there is some rhyme, some reason behind it. I could see that. What I'm thinking is that if Canelo Alvarez, if he's not really serious about fighting Callum Smith, if it turns out that all of that was just hogwash and he ends up fighting somebody else, whoever it is, it's his problem. But if that doesn't work out and Callum's not the next guy, and they don't make any moves to fight in December, as Joe Gallagher suggested, if that's what happens, then they should revisit that offer from Frank Warren. To have the guy fight on BT Sport. They should revisit it. But right now, as it stands, given what's going on, yeah, there is a bit of a precedence. There is. For them to say that's not enough to have our guy cross that street. And, this is a difficult situation to assess. I mean, it really is. If you're trying to be objective, you're trying to be unbiased, you're looking at the situation to see what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, well, you can't vilify Frank Warren for trying to get his guy a fight. That's his job. And it's a sizable fight. It's a great fight. The aesthetic would be great to see Callum Smith tested against what is one of the better defensive fighters and counterpunchers at the weight. You understand? So you can't fault Frank Warren for extending that olive branch and trying to get the fight made. But in turn, if you look at it from Callum Smith, Joe Gallagher, and the matchroom angle of it, you want our guy to cross the street for 50%. You want our guy to do that, to go fight on a rival network, under a rival banner, for only 50%.
Those eggs need more bacon.
At a time when our name is being tied to what could be a potential Canelo Alvarez fight. In order for you to entice us more than that does, you've got to make us a more sizable offer. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. That if I were in that situation, if it were me, and I knew that there was a possibility that I could get a Canelo fight, well, let's look at the state of the weight class. I might hold out to see if I can get that Canelo fight. And if I can't, then I'll look into that offer from Frank Warren. It's playing it a bit close to the chest, but better still, that would be the way to do it, because you stand to make more money with Canelo, a lot more money with Canelo, than you would with Billy Joe Saunders. And as far as Billy Joe Saunders, he's going to be there. He's not going nowhere, because he's in the same situation, more or less, that Callum is. But Callum has a unique opportunity because he's got the kind of network ties that could see him getting a Canelo Alvarez fight. So I think they're playing it close to the chest, I do, but I don't think they're being completely unreasonable. In other news, just in keeping with things that old Fish Eyes is working on, right now he's on the hunt for what is an American opponent for Tyson Fury's next fight. They're looking at different dates, different venues. They're looking at Madison Square Garden at a date sometime in the fall, maybe at the end of October or the beginning of September. And, he talked about how Jarrell Miller actually is in the running for a Tyson Fury fight. But, that's neither here nor there. They haven't decided on that yet. But preferably what they do want for Tyson Fury's next fight here stateside is an American opponent, because a British guy fighting a German guy in Las Vegas, it's just kind of arbitrary. And I understand that. But with those things in mind, these are just my thoughts, and with those things in mind, I really don't think that there is a better candidate for Tyson Fury's next fight than Jarrell Miller. We all know everything that went on with Jarrell Miller and what happened leading up to the Anthony Joshua fight, how he was subsequently blackballed for that. He's under suspension right now. But better still, that whole fiasco got a lot of attention. So just imagine how much of a statement Tyson Fury could make here stateside if he were to take that guy on of his own volition, voluntarily, just so that he could make a splash in the American market. I honestly think that in terms of garnering attention for the fight, against someone who can actually help Tyson sell it. Because, think about it. Tom Schwartz, that guy, he barely spoke a lick of English, that fucking guy. A guy like that's not going to help you sell the fight. But you get a real trash talker up there, real trash talker like Jarrell Miller, up there with another trash talker, world-class trash talker in Tyson Fury, and you could actually get a lot of attention for that fight. Stylistically, it's a great fight. Why is that? Tyson Fury is a pure boxer. He's one of the few guys in the heavyweight division that has that kind of a style. He's a pure boxer. And it just so happens that Jarrell Miller is a pressure fighter. When you mix those two styles together, it usually yields a very aesthetically pleasing fight because that pressure fighter has the kind of style to make the otherwise calm, comfortable, and cool pure boxer a bit uncomfortable. Now, I will say this. That kind of a style matchup does pose significant risks to a pure boxer. It does. To match a pure boxer, a hit not get hit kind of fighter, against a pressure fighter that wants to walk him down and stalk him and rough him up in and out of the clinch, you understand? It can be risky. And the only saving grace in those kinds of style matchups, that kind of a situation, is if the pure boxer operates at a level much higher than the pressure fighter, because operating at a level much higher than the pressure fighter will allow him to circumvent and work through that stylistic disadvantage. That's saying that your A-level pure boxer can still beat your B-level pressure fighter. He might struggle a bit because of that stylistic disadvantage, but he will be able to come out on top. Think of your Erislandy Lara, pure boxer, versus Alfredo Angulo, pressure fighter. It's that kind of a situation. Angulo, he did manage to drop Lara once or twice, but Lara did manage to win the fight. And that's because, well, while Angulo was a pressure fighter, you know, he wasn't at the same level with his pressure fighting that Lara was with his pure boxing. That's essentially how it breaks down. Now, if you match, you know, Tyson Fury in there with Jarrell Miller, it's a very interesting situation. It's risky enough that people will pay attention, and given the intangibles, everything that Jarrell Miller has been associated with, everything that Tyson Fury is trying to do here in the States, it is a situation to where you can get a lot of attention for the fight. I mean, you really could. And since they are so insistent on securing what is an American opponent for what would be Tyson Fury's second fight since leaguing up with Top Rank and ESPN, there's no better candidate for that than Jarrell Miller. I mean, I know that a lot of people feel some kind of way about that guy, that he shouldn't even be allowed to box, how much fucking gear he was on. I get all of that. It's just that in keeping with what they are looking for, and the sport of boxing being the way that it is, that it's got a bit of a revolving door policy when it comes to pet users, you understand? That, you know, you put all of that aside and you ask yourself, what opponent out there meets their needs the best? Who could they really find that could give them what they're looking for? Well, I can't think of anyone better than Jarrell Miller. Not for what they're looking for, not to make a splash and create an event in the United States that actually would get more attention, much more attention than a Tom Schwartz. I can't think of anyone better than Jarrell Miller.